Imagine discovering farming is not about what happens above the ground, but what happens below the ground. It's the soil sponge, the microbiology right beneath our feet. Glenn Elzinga of Alderspring Ranch brings us on an incredible journey as he watches and witnesses his land and his farm wake up as he practices regenerative organic agriculture and tunes us into the importance of relationship in all of it, in life, in farming, and in soil. I'm really excited to share this interview with you. I'm Natalie Forstbauer, founder and editor-in-chief of Heart and Soul magazine. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the conversation.
Hello. Hi, Glenn.
Hey, how are you doing, Natalie? Can you see me okay?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Oh, we're good.
I sure
It's a
can.
beautiful day. Yeah, good.
Good.
Wow, are you
Oh,
are you standing?
I am standing. Yeah, I've
that's
been doing a lot
wonderful.
of sitting lately, so I often stand for when I get to hop on
That's a
interviews.
great idea. I think I got to do the same thing. So
Yeah.
sit
Yeah.
too much on these podcasts, and actually, it probably wouldn't be a good idea. But
Originally, the magazine was supposed to be readership based, right? And so there's a lot of articles, there's videos, there's some podcasts that people can listen into.
Yeah.
And then as I started to connect with ranchers and farmers and gardeners such as yourself and leaders and researchers in the industry, they were like, yeah, sure, let's hop on a call, you can interview me. I was like,
no, that's great.
let's do it.
No, it's good. I think
So,
it's really good. So
yeah.
and especially with COVID thing, I think people are they're fit to be tied. They can't go to conferences, they can't hang out with people, and they just crave human connectivity. And this is a poor facsimile for that, but it's what it is. So it's something.
It is. And I think the more we can reorient it and change our story around the COVID, the more connectivity we can find in what we are able to create.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an opportunity, right? And who knew, that COVID would create opportunities. And it's a very ironic time, because when it first came down, we thought, oh, this is going to be a disaster. But I hate to say it, there's a lot of lives lost, and some were my friends, but there's blessing there too for us. We've made unprecedented amount of connections with people, and it's just because of the nature of the COVID beast. It's just made us connect in different ways. So
yeah, tell me more about that. Tell me more about the impact and the blessings that have been in that, in the COVID.
So when it first hit, we were right in the middle of hiring our seasonal range riders. We hire anywhere between 9 and 12 interns every year, and we put them on horseback up on our grazing range, which is 70 square miles of broken country. And I actually I forgot it, but I knew the square kilometer comparison, so I could convert all this to metric, Natalie, but I forgot my conversion numbers, what the numbers actually were. I mean, I could sure convert them. But anyway, 70 square miles, 46,000 acres, very remote, broken mountain country. And so we hire these kids, and they're almost all kids. We've had people my age come on, Natalie, and they just crater because it's so arduous. They're riding a saddle horse for 14 or 15 hours a day a lot of times, and they just burn. It literally burns their butt off. I had a great guy come out last year. He's my age. Great guy. I just love the guy. And he just said, after 3 days, he said, I'm so glad you didn't hire me for the summer, because I could not have done it. It would have killed me. So, but anyway, so we put these young people up there, and then COVID hits right in the middle of all that. So now we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to pick up all these people from all around the country. And of course, we had no idea the gravity of COVID at that time. It was, brand new thing. So right away we came up with a sequestration plan, basically quarantine approach when they came onto the ranch, and it worked. And within 2 weeks, everybody was up to speed, and we had them in a remote bunkhouse in the middle of nowhere. And then they moved to cow camp, and of course, you can't get more isolated in cow camp because you never see another human. So it's geographic isolation, on steroids. So that affected us, at first in ways we never, conceptualized. And it's because, even though we live in a very remote location in this valley, I mean, you can relate. You've seen Saskatchewan, Alberta, remote is commonplace in places in the heartland of Canada. And still, we had elderly neighbors that we just love, and we wanted to ensure that we weren't bringing, we weren't creating a vector for the illness to descend on them, because they were the people who are, likely the most easily compromised by COVID because of pre-existing conditions and whatnot. So it became actually this life crisis for us, because we love these people and we didn't want them exposed, and we did what we could, and I'm sure we weren't responsible for anything, but inevitably it happened, and we did lose some of our older friends who already had pre-existing conditions. So that's the disaster of COVID. Virtually all of us have friends that we've lost. As far as the family here, we all had it. We actually when we came down with it, Natalie, we actually loaded up the camper. We were already off the range then. We had our cattle home, and we went camping up to a beautiful lake up in the mountains, and we camped out for a week there. And we slept a lot, but we played cards and we had a lot of fun. It was kind of the COVID camp.
Awesome.
So it went, so it didn't really affect us very much. We actually had a lot of fun. But some people don't, and some people have
That's right.
absolute disaster. This was October, Natalie. I still can't taste certain things at all. I had really good taste, and I'm wondering if it's gone forever. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit, because
that's interesting.
It does two things, and I've met a lot of people, and I've been on online forums where it's one of two things. And one, it affects different aspects of taste, but it also colors your taste with this weird. Have you had it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. I don't know that I've had it. I mean, it's possible that I've had it and didn't know that I've had it, but I don't. I think my daughters may have had it. I'm almost positive they had it, but it was at the very, very beginning. And all the symptoms that people talk about is what they experience. But
yes.
I don't know if
I know all my kids had it. My wife had it. So, but they don't have any of these after effects.
Okay.
And we all did okay with the illness itself. I feel great. It's not like I got, currently long-term existing, physical manifestations other than this taste thing. But anyway, there's a whole list of foods, and I can't develop a relationship between any of them. But there's this whole list of foods that have now what I call the COVID flavor. And so I thought I was losing my mind. So Carol, my wife, actually Googled it. She said, what is going on? Because she found just innumerable amount of people with the same thing that I got. And there was one gal, I don't know where she was from, but she said, she described it very succinctly. And and Carol reads this to me and says, so I'm wondering if this is what you taste, because it's an objectionable taste or smell that's associated with all these things. And sometimes it's a place, and more often than not, it's a food. And so I said, well, describe it to me. And this gal says, so the nearest thing I could come up with in taste and smell associated with this COVID thing is that it reminds me of when you buy a brand new stove and you turn on the oven for the first time and you want to clear out of the house. Do you know the smell I'm talking about? Have you ever done this?
Wow.
You buy
Yeah,
a
it's
brand,
really like chemical almost,
yeah,
right?
brand new electric range, you turn it on for the first time and we say to the
Yeah.
kids, get out of here because that doesn't smell right. That's the smell. And so that's the long reaching weird effect that I think that a lot of us have. No idea what it means. Something
Interesting.
metabolic. It's got to be some kind of metabolic
It had,
byproduct.
yeah,
So I
yeah, it's very
no idea what
curious.
the mechanism is, but anyway, so going back to your original question. So, we run this online store and we've always done pretty well on selling beef and our other, we raise lamb, we raise pastured pork here, along with our grass-fed certified organic beef. And we've always done pretty good online. And about 65 or 70% of the yield off this ranch, about 400 head, go directly through that web store fulfillment center. That's about an hour away from here in a town. We don't have a town around us here. Where, we have a few good people that help us fulfill those orders every Monday. Carol and I actually go down there every Monday and work with the crew. And so we're kind of keeping our inventory. We're treading water on inventory. We're processing beef every 2 weeks, that 400 head. And there was a flow through happening from, the processor to our fulfillment center. And then, people order a la carte, 2 ribeyes, 5 New Yorks, some ground beef and a flat iron steak, put it in a box, and off she goes to anywhere in the country. And so, so that inventory that usually takes 2 weeks to go through sold out in 24 hours when the lockdowns first started. And
Wow.
Natalie, it actually sold out in 2 hours. The rest was just ground beef. Everything else just went poof. It was like
Wow.
somebody waved a magic wand over the web store and all the inventory went to zero. And so it kind of brought us to our knees in terms of, the electronic management, the virtual management
Mm.
of all those platforms. And it actually
Mm-hmm.
facilitated a lot of changes that need to happen, growing pains. So, a lot of people said to us immediately after that happened, they're like, you're going to make so much money. That's what they're saying to us. And so there's 2 problems associated with that idea. One is we only have this many cattle and it takes 2.5 years to raise them, right? And,
That's right.
so you don't just go dinkle dinkle dink, wave your magic wand and say, woo, more cattle, So
That's
especially,
right.
when we're trying to follow through with this kind of systematic integrity of scale to where, we know where everything is flow through, where it's, to us, we just call it husbandry. We just know the origin of every animal. Some of it has to do with the organic. They'll ask me when they do the inspection, they'll pick out a random pound of ground beef and they'll say, okay, take this pound of ground beef by lot number and tell me about the birthplace of this individual animal and where it's lived for its entire life and what pasture, what geographic square foot this animal walked on for its entire life, and prove it. That's
right.
what organic inspection should do. Well, anyway, that's what most of my inspectors have done. And so
Yeah.
we got to do that, but it plays even more into it, Natalie, because if I know where that animal's been all its life, I can actually predict what that beef is going to be like. And
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to predict that because that's what my customers expect, right? They expect me to know what the disposition is in terms of their experiences, the flavor, the texture, and the health benefits, the nutrition density of that steak, or ground beef or whatever. So so because of that, we couldn't just ratchet up, let's go buy some more cattle. Let's go to the sale yard and buy some more cattle. It's unthinkable for us to do something like that because that was exactly the paradigm we were trying to counter in our entire establishment of this business. And we have won the trust. I mean, it's a hard-earned thing to get that trust.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way we were going to compromise it just because this COVID thing happened. So we did think, oh yeah, there are ways we could scale up we could increase our harvest a little bit based on the numbers we had, because we had a little more cattle than we needed to at that point. And so we thought we could find another processor to do that. No can do. They all booked within a week, you know. In fact, our processor, you know, I asked them immediately, I said, hey, let's pick it up a little bit. We could pick up a few more. And they were like, absolutely not, because they said, Glenn, you know, we're booked to 2023 and 20, and now they're booked to 2024.
Wow.
You know, and so there's no room. It's ironic because, you know, Natalie, I feel like, you know, with economies of scale, you know, there's a lot of us who could stand to, you know, make more than, you know, the small margin that, you know, most of us in sustainable ag do, just because of that economy of scale opportunity. But the opportunity is not there without a processor, right? And
That's right.
and I'm sure it's the same in Canada. I'm sure you're
It
seeing
is
the
the same.
exact same thing, you know. In fact, I've had
Yep.
Canadians begging me to ship beef across state lines, you know, across the international border. And for us, that's a little unthinkable, just because, well, if we're already sold out in the US, why would we want to, you know, compromise that even more by engaging across the border? So it is what it is. And so, you know, it created for us the scarcity thing, but the opportunity that we really won on was we created a whole bunch of new relationships. Because all of a sudden, you know, with the mega packer crisis, you know, the big packers, the Tysons, the Cargills, you know, closing down their plants categorically because of COVID infections. You know, people all of a sudden realize, wait, the juggernaut, the huge food system that we have created in our countries is severely broken. I don't even know what I was doing trusting it in the first place. You know, so now I'm like rethinking everything. I don't trust them. I don't want to buy from them anymore. They're not, you know, they're not humane treaters of even humans, right?
That's right.
There's huge problems associated with human rights violations in a lot of these plants. And so they're like, well, I want to know where my beef comes from. I want to meet them virtually at least. And so here you and I are virtually, and this same platform, you know, Zoom, or maybe it's just Instagram or Facebook. Turns out that we've been able to build extensive relationships with tons of new people this way. And that's exciting.
That's exciting.
That's really cool. So I wish, you know, Natalie, we could just all meet, you know, that they could come here and we could hang out for a few days, and because it'd just be so much fun, you know, in the virtual thing. So
that's right. And those are probably the next steps, right? As things evolve and change.
Yeah. I think, you know, borders open, states open up, and you know, people get vaccinated and stuff, you know, that there's going to be finally, I don't know, if it won't be a reestablishment of normal, it'll be an establishment of a new normal. And I'm hoping when that new normal happens, that well, we can kind of reinvest in human relationships. You know, that's you know, that's really what COVID has taught us, is how essential that relationship is. Because, well, you know, the whole world's gone crazy, Natalie, you know, and, you know, without these human relationships, what do we have? You know, really, what do we have? So this connectivity that we've been able to have through the business of what we do has turned into more than husbandry of animals. It's just this, it's become this trust, it's become this relationship more than ever. So that's been the blessing for us, really, because it made us realize these things. So that's beautiful, you know, but it's beautiful with this huge twist of irony on the other side of it, because, you know, we've lost friends, you know.
And that's hard. And
Yeah,
especially in the way that that life transition has been present within this COVID era, is there's been so much isolation and in those transitions. And at the same time, what you're saying, other relationships have been really deep. And so how do we marry this new experience so that we can have that presence
Yes. Yeah, that's a
with
good question.
people who are transitioning and feeling vulnerable and feeling isolated?
We're going to have to
So
create some hacks, right? So
yes, yes, yes. And thankfully we have things like Zoom. And what are the
yes.
next steps? Like,
Yeah.
what are the next steps? What is a new normal? And I love how in relationship to the hardships that and the fire that you've walked through, that you've also deepened into that. And I'm wondering, what are your next steps? So if you aren't able to really build out your production and increase your production, what are your next steps to continue to give you meaning in the kind of work that you're doing?
So I got a phone call from my processor the other day, and they're up in Montana, across the Montana-Idaho line, and they've just become really good friends. They never close. They're tiny, it's a family deal, just like we are. And they have a few employees as well. And they called me up and said, yeah, I've been throwing these things at them ever since COVID hit. Hey, how about I send you X amount more? Or this, and we joke, and they just laugh at me. But the other day they said, hey, let's get real on this discussion. And I said, well, when are we talking? And they said, well, maybe, within a year we could maybe let's transition into that space of at least thinking about that. So so my girls, I have 7 daughters, Natalie. I'm checking for the
So
eye roll.
awesome.
Of your...
I'm the oldest of 12, so
awesome. So anyway, you don't think I'm crazy.
you're my people.
Or maybe you thought.
No, I haven't had 7 myself, or even 12, but I deeply empathize. My childhood was and I grew up in an organic farm, so
Oh, wow.
I feel like you're my people. Like
Yes.
So
Awesome.
when I read your blog posts and I listen to your children's stories through the words they share and your stories, I feel like I'm at home. I feel like, yeah,
good deal.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, you can relate. So anyway, I get these 7 daughters, and Carol and I are, I'm 59. Carol's she's 59 right now. And, we're just kind of, we both of us don't want to really retire. The retirement thing is not really, it's not a version of reality for us. I mean, I play golf, Natalie, but it's once a year, and I have fishing. I got fishing rods, and when I use them, I got to put new line in because it's been that long since I went fishing, So, and I love to fish, and I love to hunt. I love to play golf, but that's not a reality for me. The reality for me is like doing something meaningful on the land, and not remaining as the by any means the leader of this operation. But Carol and I both would like to work for the kids. My oldest is 26, going on 27. She'll soon be 27. And my youngest is 16. One of them's married. I got 2 grandkids and one on the way. And so here's the weird place we are in agriculture, Natalie. I live in a valley, that's pretty good size. It's the size of the smallest state. This valley is almost the size of Rhode Island. And it's surrounded by 11 and 12,000 foot peaks, and we have this kind of broad mid valley that's relatively flat. And there's 300 people in it, and a lot of them have become friends, and they're almost all ranchers. They can make some sort of living on the land because that's really all there is here. And there's a few farmers, but most run cattle, some run sheep. But, I've talked to a lot of these folks, over a cup of coffee or whatever. And I say, I see them telling their kids that there's no hope in agriculture.
Mm,
These guys are all my age. I'm 59. And,
yeah.
I don't know, you can see my hair's gray. and
You wear it well.
Which is the stereotype, right, of
Yeah.
the farmer or rancher in North America today, right? So
Mhm.
I checked it out. I actually Googled this. What is the average age of a farmer in America? It's probably the same as Canada, 57.5 years. I'm over average, okay, by just a little bit. So what does that tell us about, young people coming in agriculture? So when I asked one of my
Mhm.
neighbors what you tell your kids about agriculture, almost categorically they say, really no hope, really no place for them on the farm or ranch. Please get a job via university in town so you can make a decent living, and you can raise a family and I can come visit you. And the inheritance is yours when I tip over or I can't work
Mhm.
anymore, but don't ranch because you're gonna, there's no way you're gonna make her. And I mean, you look at a John Deere tractor, you can pay easily $250,000 for a John Deere tractor today.
Easily.
you know
It's on the low end, right?
That's on the low end. So when I was a kid, you could buy a John Deere for a few tens of thousands of dollars, and that was a lot of money back then. But now it's like the inflation rate of farm equipment has pretty much kept up with the inflation rate, but the wages, the earnings from farm products, I Googled it the other day just to see what livestock prices, they don't keep up with the inflation rate, right? So
No.
our equivalent of what we're getting for our calves, if you're a cow calf guy in this day and age, is half of what it was in the 1970s. So how can you
That's
make it?
hard.
And then the John Deeres are moving further and further away from you,
Mhm.
as a reality, without tons of um, payments and
Mhm.
warranties that you're required to get because you simply can't fix on them anymore, right? So there's all
Yeah.
this burden associated with equity and equity erosion in today's modern day agricultural scene.
Mm.
So, but on the other hand, Carol and I are like saying to our kids, hey, we want you to stay. We want to work for you someday because there's hope. There's a way to make this work.
And so how do you change that story?
So, it it took us a while to figure out what that could be. I mean, we've been at this now for 29 years, and Carol and I have always worked on farms, and I had a forestry stint for a while, but before that, I was working on dairies, vegetables, grain farms. Carol was brought up on a corn and soybean farm in the Midwest. So, we have all this agricultural background, and some of it was, all of it was really good as far as teaching us things, right? It was all super
Mhm.
positive, and we had a lot of fun while we're doing it. But there's some real negative production protocols, right? I mean, we both engaged 100% in the killing of soil, in the murder of soil biota and, soil micro and,
Yeah.
medium fauna organisms. So I take the guilt there. You ever hear Alan Savory's thing about killing elephants? Well, I mean, what's the greater gravity? Of course, yeah, elephants are this big megafauna thing, but if you've categorically participated in the murder of literally billions of soil microorganisms, and as a result cause that carbon to volatilize, are you any less of a culprit? You know what I mean?
Ooh, such a good living question. Such a good
So
question.
anyway, I claim full culpability in that participation. I
Mhm.
put so many chemicals down on the ground, and it was ignorance
Mhm.
was bliss, but it wasn't bliss at night because I went to bed often with these mega headaches, from using
Mm.
chemicals and fertilizers and totally unprotected in those days. This is the 70s, right?
Right. Yeah. And of course the link wasn't made, right? You probably, did you make that link at the time?
No linkage.
It's
No linkage.
right.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
Rachel Carson was like crazy, you know. When she published Silent Spring, was it the early 70s? I think it was. And that woman was a nutburger, you know, as far as
Yeah.
all of us were concerned at that time.
Yes.
You know, there were a few people embracing it, the Greenpeacers and whatnot, but we weren't. We were producing food, right?
That's right. And doing it well and doing it right.
Yeah.
You
So
had control.
I mean, we actually had that idea that we were producing food, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, we took an apple. I worked in these orchard, and you took this apple, and it had this like, you know, fog all over it, and you just took a bite. And granted, yeah, that first bite was a little bitter, but what the heck, right? We're producing food, and that apple was blemish free, right? Except for that weird cloud of weird stuff
Yeah.
on it, you know, that made it taste bitter. But anyway, yeah, so we were part of that, and Carol and I were like, you know, we kind of put that all into the background of our mind, you know, all that stuff, and it enabled us to look at things with a new perspective. So you know, and then this whole soil biology thing came along. And, you know, to be honest with you, just like 15 years ago, we weren't even thinking about biology. We wanted production on top. We were already organic at that time, and we were seeing changes with the investment into organic within about 3 or 4 years. And we were never
Awesome.
like big time chemical ranchers. You know, we put a little bit of fertilizer down. We never sprayed our alfalfa for weevil from the air like our neighbors did. And, you know, we both hated chemicals because we both had gotten sick from them. So we didn't really embrace a chemical agriculture when we got started here. And everything was above ground in our minds. We weren't even thinking about soils. And so we did soils tests back in the 10s. I think it was 09 or 08, just to create a baseline because we wanted to see where we're at. And you know what, Natalie, we hardly looked at them. Because the recommendations came back and said, you need more nitrogen, you need more. And I totally expected them to say that. And I'm not going to put it down because I'm certified organic. So it's like, I totally expected this. This is totally, you know, what we expected to see from it. So we just put it in a file cabinet drawer.
And Glenn, Glenn, just to give perspective, when did you transition to certified organic?
That was 03 where we started.
That was 03.
Actually, 02 was transition.
Okay.
01 was the first year transition. 04 was the first certification.
And when did you start ranching?
In 93.
In 93. So 10 years in is when you started to make
actually
that transition.
92 was when we started ranching.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, organic wasn't really a thing that much in the 90s. There was very little development of, you know, protocols, and NOP was very infantile at that time, National Organic Program. So, and you know, Carol and I embraced the grass-fed thing right off the bat. It was almost an unknown word. We'd go to farmers markets that sell beef in like 93 with the little kids, you know, a baby on my back, and people would say, well, I don't even know what this means, grass-fed. I don't even know what this means.
Right.
You know,
we had beef on our farm too, and it was all grass-fed and grass-finished, and it was the same thing in BC. So maybe it was a little bit more progressive because it's like the West Coast.
Yes.
But same thing. When in 2003, I moved out to Saskatchewan, and we had beef out here too, and I transitioned our herd to grass-fed, and people just like their eyes crossed and had no idea what we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they got cows too, right? And their cows are eating grass, and it's like your cows are eating grass, so why you're calling yours grass-fed and mine are not? So you know, there was a big semantic struggle we had to go through there, and eventually, you know, the media got a hold of it a little bit and started to do some of that education for us. But I mean, you probably remember when you're talking to people about grass-fed beef, you'd lose them. Their eyes would glaze over to a deer in the headlights look.
Yeah.
And it's like you just lost them. They just kind of slowly turn around and walk down the farmer's market. And you know, it was frustrating. It's like, what are we even thinking with this grass-fed thing? But it was the right thing to do. And
Mhm.
eventually we got a clientele there and it started working. But anyway, I think the thing that tipped us over to organic was another question we'd get with the grass-fed. We'd be cooking our beef in a store partner we had in Boise, Idaho, and people would come by. We'd fill the whole store with this nice beefy aroma, and they'd come by and they'd say, "Man, I love that smell. I want to eat some." And so they take a bite and they say, "So this is grass-fed," and they're starting to get it now, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, wow, that's cool. And then the next question for them invariably was, "Is this organic?" And I'd tell them the truth. I'd say, "Well, no, it's not. No hormones, no antibiotics. We don't use any chemicals of any kind." And they're like, "Well,
Mhm.
why aren't you organic?" And they asked that question, right? And so Carol and I just thought about it and said, "Well, why aren't we organic? This is stupid." So it turns out that
Mhm.
organic was a little more than that. And that there's quite a few more hoops that we had to really get in place before we were legit. I said,
Yeah.
one pet peeve of Carol's that I'll insert in here is when people say they're beyond organic.
Right.
That moniker that they
I
use, "Hey,
concur.
we're
Mhm.
beyond organic," and it drives her absolutely batty because beyond implies that you've already arrived at organic and now you've moved beyond. Don't have a problem with that, but almost invariably the people using beyond organic really don't even know what organic requires.
That's right.
And there's some years, Natalie, where we spend about $35,000 a year on being organic, because we,
Yeah.
we we have to do hand weed control using crews with grub hose, or pulling weeds out on our 46,000 acre grazing allotment, or, there's all these things that take a
Mhm.
lot of time, record keeping. There's a lot of burden there. And she's like, "Wait, we fought for that organic and you're claiming it, and you don't even know what the requirements are, you know."
Mhm.
And she'll ask him, she'll be like, "I bet you're worming your cattle, I bet
Mhm.
you're doing this, I bet you're doing this." And they're like, almost invariably they say, "Well, yeah, we are." And they
Yeah.
don't even know
Yeah.
that that's not an acceptable practice. So
That's right.
anyway, moving back into the soil thing, around 17 or 18, I think we had a master's student come and ride on our riding program up on the range. And she happened to be a recent grad of Iowa State University and with a master's in soils. And she just loved soil, and she loved the living component of soil. And
Mm.
she said, "Hey, how about after this stint, you pay me to just do a soil survey on your land? And let's see what changed over the past 10 years since your last soil test." And I said, "That's exciting. Let's do it." So she did. And the results, Natalie, just flat blew us away. We tripled our organic matter in 10 years.
Wow.
And, there's something niggling at me. The reason I was like, "Yes, let's do it," and Carol was like, "Yes, let's do it," is because we're seeing these dramatic changes above ground, which for us was always the indicator, because we're
So
doubling.
tell me about
Go ahead.
yeah, just tell us what those changes above ground that you were
Yeah,
seeing.
so we're doubling the carrying capacity of our pastures. We're putting twice the amount of cows out there, you know.
Wow.
We were doubling, not categorically, but a lot of doubling of average daily gains, which is the metric that even feedlots use,
Mhm.
to determine their productivity, not necessarily profitability, but their productivity. But for
Yep.
us, it was directly translated to profitability because we had no input costs, right? I mean, our
Yeah.
cattle are eating on the same acre, they're eating the similar species of grass, and but they're there for a longer duration, carrying
Mhm.
capacity, and they're doubling their weight gains. And so Carol and I were starting to wonder, about 5 years ago, what is
Mhm.
going on? And
Mhm.
we both had a hunch that it was happening underground, but it took this master's graduate in soils to say, "I think something's going on underground." So anyway, we got some soil tests back that were 7.3% organic matter that were like around 1.9 10 years ago.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, all these synapses in our minds started sparking. They started connecting,
Yeah.
right? Because all of a sudden we're making these dramatic connections between biological activity in our soils and reaching all the way out to this other side of the spectrum, this really clinical, dirty area for some people called profitability, you know.
Mhm.
And what we realize is,
Mm.
you know, for us, and then we kind of realize for almost all of North American agriculture, we've lost our way. We've lost our way with the connectivity to a living soil and all the benefits it adds. You know, I mean, like for, you know, I don't know if this is a chicken or the egg thing, but we watch our species diversity increase dramatically. We didn't put seeds down. We just watched species show up on our pastures. It's like, oh my gosh, here's this plant. You know, we haven't ever seen this here, but now it's here, you know, and you know, and water holding capability. That's the, our you know, in just this time of year when the snow comes off. Right now I'm looking out at the pastures and there's not much snow on them anymore. It's almost all gone. But before, when that snow came off, we always got stuck. We had to bring a big tractor out there, and we don't even have a big one. Sometimes we had to borrow the neighbors to just get the stupid hay out into the field to where we feed cattle. We don't house our cattle, or we don't put them in feedlots. They're out there on the grass, spreading their manure out and leaving wasted hay out there. And that actually was that importation of biomass was a huge factor for us to build soils. So, but anyway, we'd get stuck every spring. It's like, oh, here we come, mud season. You know, I mean, you know about mud season, Natalie. I mean,
Yes.
If you're in agriculture, there's a mud season, right?
That's right.
But you know what? We haven't had one for 4 years. Even though we've had the moisture, we've had rain on snow events. I took some films a couple of years ago, or actually there's still photos of me standing out in a pasture right after we fed, looking at tire tracks, and there is none, where we just fed with the pickup truck or a draft team of horses. There's no tracks where we put the hay down. The cattle aren't sinking in, and half the snow is still out there, and it's raining. Okay. Normally that land would have been mud, but now guess what? Even frozen soil has a macropore space to be able to receive water. And when we receive water in the arid Intermountain West, it's a gift straight from God, right? When we receive water, and you don't want to lose any of it, right? You don't want it to flow down off the land. You want it in the ground. Want it
in it.
And now it's going in the ground, not on the ground. It's going in the ground.
Wow.
And that's totally transformed our life, and just really, you know, that fact that we don't get stuck anymore just really gave a whole bunch of validity to that living soil sponge hypothesis talked about by Walter Yenny. When he talked about the living soil sponge, I had like a Christmas tree of light bulbs go off in my head. It's like, oh no, that is exactly what we're seeing here. And I got really excited. I got really excited because I was like, the water, the soil feels saturated. It feels almost muddy on top, but there's room for more. And when there's room for more, and you're working in the arid Intermountain West, you're grateful. You're just grateful that you get to keep it. You get to keep the water because you need every drop, you know? So anyway, that's why it's that soil thing. But there's one more, I call it a three-legged stool. I mean, first you have, you know, just your cattle, you got your existing biology, whether it be plants or other living organisms that we live and interact with, whether it be elk, deer, wolves, earthworms, or whatever. They're all this interconnected web that we live and work with on this ranch. So that's one aspect of it, the ecological capital that you have. Then there's this soil capital, this biological capital that we're learning about. And then the third leg for us, and you know, people have different concepts of what works and what doesn't, but what we realized we were missing was relationship. And we talked about relationship with COVID. And when we have that relationship with the eaters of our food, everything becomes really strong with that three-legged stool, because now finally you're a price maker instead of a price taker, so you're not tied to the vulnerability of markets that are absolutely meaningless to what our production protocol is. I wrote a chef today. His name's Dan Barber. He's written this book called The Third Plate. He's in New York City. He and I were on a webinar together, and fascinating guy. I haven't read the book. I got to get the book, because this guy is actually speaking my language, and he's like, far end spectrum of food as this elite kind of celebrity chef guy in New York City. And he asked me what the attributes we judge beef on, we judge steak on. And let me pull up that email, because just writing this email to the guy actually really kind of took me back to relationship again. And I had no idea that, the process of growing a steak is still relationship. So, usually when we evaluate steak, it's based on like two things, right? It's flavor and tenderness. All right. Tenderness has been reduced scientifically into this thing called the Werner-Bachelor shear test. Werner-Bachelor shear test. And it's this mechanical device that actually measures the tear coefficient of steak. And, you're supposed to be able to translate that to how well the chew is and stuff. We don't have a fancy device. We have our mouths that we chew with. So, but we still evaluate a New York strip from every beef that we sell online through taste and tenderness tests. And that's, I think, what he was after. I sent him way more than he wanted, because what I realized when he asked that question was there was all these other attributes that go into the evaluation of each steak. And it's because of two things. One, I have a relationship with the animal on this side. And then number two is I have a relationship with the eater of the beef on this side. So I'm going to just run through them real quick. The age of the animal, okay, it's huge, because age correlates to tenderness. And, for us, age is also part of disposition, because they spent more time with us. Our cattle run pretty wild on the range, but as we spend time with them on horseback, they get to know us personally. Like the other night, I had to go out there at 10:30 at night in pitch dark, because we're pumping water. It was 13 degrees. And we're pumping water up to where the cattle are, because we're protecting this spring area for wildlife, and we don't want our cattle going down there at all. So we pump the water up. It's a portable pump, and I was concerned they were out of water, and sure enough, they were. And so I go over there and walk into them and start that pump. And when they first saw me walk in the moonlight, they freaked out. They spazzed out of their minds. 350 head just went, But then I just said, "Hey guys, it's me." I literally said that. "Hey guys, it's me." And they stopped in the dark, and they came back to hang out while I worked on the pump.
Wow.
So age of animal is a
powerful.
big time, because I built a relationship now with these animals. So and because of that, I can almost begin to predict what they're going to do in terms of how they're going to perform, for their ultimate destiny, right? Gender of animal at the time of harvest. So I find that heifers, just because of the way God made a heifer, she's going to put on fat quicker than a steer, and she's going to marble quicker than a steer. So, that to me is a meat quality coefficient. So, and you've probably seen this. Genetic disposition of animal, phenotype of animal just before harvest. So, both phenotype and genotype I put into account. Some of our Angus cattle have a little bit of obvious Simmental influence, because the American Angus Association allowed it. And that automatically means to me late maturing, less tenderness, phenotypic maturity or physiological maturity is going to be later. As a result, that animal is probably going to be leaner, less marbling. Okay. And for us, marbling is such a huge deal, because with marbling, we get all these health benefits associated with fat
That's right.
deposition, right? I mean, there's omega-3
Yeah.
fatty acids, there's conjugated linoleic acids, there's a ton of phytochemicals that are found in fat, right? Am I going into too much
Yes.
detail?
No, that's super important, because I think it's something that needs to be more understood and is misunderstood in the beef and animal
It is.
context.
It is. We've missed the boat here.
Yeah, the nutritional, and I explain that to people. The nutritional value of grass-fed and finished beef they're two completely different products from a
They are.
grain and a grass-fed.
Yes. Yes.
So I
Yes.
appreciate, go deep.
Okay. So then the type of grass you're eating at harvest is definitely going to affect steak quality. You know, these are all things I'm cognizant when I'm deciding what to do with the beef that I receive. This is just before I'm going to do the steak test. These things are all rolling through my head because I want to match what that beef has done for me, what that animal has given me and those attributes to what my customer wants in terms of their attributes. So these are all evaluation factors. The fiber orientation of the longissimus muscle in the middle meats. The longissimus muscle is the Latin name for that muscle that goes all the way through New York and ribeye. It forms the core of the ribeye, and it's the entire New York strip, or the strip line through those middle meats. Those are like price makers or price takers parts of an animal. Those are the animals we make a lot of money off of, those middle meats, because you know, they're the ones that perform and deliver as far as steak edibility and stuff. So if the fiber orientation is sideways in there instead of directly through, perpendicular to the axis of the animal versus along the line of the animal axis, it's a completely different eating experience, right? And I want to know that.
It is, yeah.
By looking at that, because otherwise my consumer, my partner, who's on the other end of the relationship, is going to have a problem eating it. And I want them to know about it, at least through full disclosure, before they buy that. They're still going to get health benefits, but their eating pleasure is going to be maybe a little less. And I want to be straight with them and say, hey, this isn't going to eat as well, but I guarantee you're going to love it. And they buy it anyway, and they buy it for a reduced rate. They're very happy. Okay.
Yeah. So is that something that so I just want to ask a quick question. Is that something that the butcher shares with you when he harvests the animal?
No, I
just
look at it when it shows up. Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, you in the package.
In the package.
In the packet. Yeah, because I can see it in the package too.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever held up like a New York or ribeye and you like see the fibers go sideways instead of straight up and down? There you go. That's it. You know, for me,
I know that. For me,
it's not a big deal, Natalie. It's probably not a big deal for you, because when that steak's on my plate, I just cut perpendicular to those fibers and I still enjoy the steak.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of my people don't know that. They don't know that. And that's TMI, right? That's too much information.
Yeah, it is.
I've lost them. Okay. I'm a steak geek. Okay.
Yeah,
but I have lost them in that translation. So I don't want them to have to think through eating a steak. I just want them to enjoy the steak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I want to know that beforehand in case they're just after nutrition and flavor, because they're still going to get that, right? But I want to just actually, I'm going to curate that steak so that they know, you know, like we have this product on our page called Leaner New Yorks or Leaner Ribeyes. And it says right there, these are not going to eat as tender as the other, you know, more marbled ones are. And that's where these steaks go. The ones with the sideways longissimus, they're going to go there because people don't have this expectation that this is going to be a dream steak. They're just after a good steak that has good nutrition, good flavor. Yeah. It's okay if it's a little more chewy. I'm good with it, you know, and I'm going to pay less, right?
That's right.
So anyway, that's all curation. Anyway, there's a bunch more, and people probably don't want to hear all these things. Like one of them that I was thinking about that was really interesting was the caramelization testing. You ever hear of this Maillard effect? You know, it's the effect when you apply heat to animal protein tissues. So you get all these secondary compounds formed, and they can absolutely make just a mediocre steak. You know, it's like putting a little butter or bacon fat in the pan, and you go ahead and pan fry that steak, and you got this nice crust, that caramelized crust. And I love those crusts. And for me, that's a dimension of eating steak and enjoying it, you know. I think
Mm-hmm.
inside of us, through our deep ancestors, they developed a predisposition toward meat that had caramelization on it. They cooked over fires. They're like, oh,
They did.
that
Yeah.
smells good. It's why when you and I, smell somebody cooking steaks on the grill, we like feel drawn, because it's like, wow, that smells really good. And it's because our ancestors had a predisposition to picking up. They had palates that adjusted to picking up those kind of flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was actually, I don't know if you read any Fred Provenza stuff, but Fred has made connections between palates, human palates, and nutritional needs. And Mark Schatzker also did that. He's a Toronto author in the Dorito Effect. He just made clear connections, clear connectivity between, human predisposition toward certain flavors based on palates is then tied directly to nutritional need, So anyway, that caramelization thing, I've had steaks that are on weird monocultural forages that we used to raise, that when the Maillard effect happens, that caramelization provides weird flavors, wonkiness.
Yeah.
So I want to test that and make sure it's going to go straight up all the way through, even if somebody caramelizes it. Because, people have these sous vide cookers now. I know a lot of people with sous vides, they're cooking them in a plastic bag, bringing them up to 130 degrees. They still pull them out and throw them on the grill for 1 minute just to get that caramelization effect. They want it, So I want to be sure they're going to live their dream with a good flavor there. So, now, in kind of backing up and going full circle here, it's really this relationship with the eater. When you have relationship with the animals, that whole relationship three-legged stool is one of the three reasons why my girls have a future in agriculture and ranching. It's because without those three things intact, that ecological capital, and in that underground soil ecological capital, and in this relationship all the way from the animal and the soil into the actual partner that eats your food, without those three legs really strong, you're vulnerable. Weather could take you out. Say I get too much rain. Think about it, Natalie. If I get too much rain, is it going to bother me? No, we're going to do a happy dance, because our pastures aren't going to turn into mud,
That's right. Yeah.
Or if it dries out, if we get a drought, does it matter? No, because we have resiliency built in a living soil sponge. If beef prices go sky high in the supermarket, do my partners care? No, because our prices are still going to be the same, And so, that just takes care of all of us, from the eater all the way down to that little tiny soil organism. It's just that connectivity is what we lost.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Glenn, do you partner with other farms as well?
We do. So there's, I think it's 5 other certified organic grass-fed ranches. We used to raise all our own calves, and now we buy yearling calves from them. And
awesome.
It took visiting them all and checking them. It goes back to this relationship thing. We just want to make sure it all added up in terms of the integrity and the kind of people they are. My kids and I have this saying, when we drive on the highways and byways to the West and we look at cattle, and we know so many people, and I love all these people, but the kids will turn to me and say, Dad, that guy should have never owned a cow.
Right.
Because they never got it. They never got connected with their animals from a husbandry standpoint. And they treat them like crap, and it just blows me away. It's like some people should never own a cow, should never own a horse, should never own a dog, and it's like, and that's okay. I'm not going to judge it. There's certain people who should not be they should be dealing with machines or whatever, but that's not us. We have connections with these animals, and so we want to make sure that each of the people who we partner with in the raising of these cattle should have cattle. And we're not causing some kind of weird animal liberation thing when we bring them over here.
Yes.
You know, we don't want the
Yes.
cattle to come here and sigh with relief and say, oh, you know, it's so much nicer here than it was on that last hellhole I was at. You know what I mean? So I want them to be
Yes. Yeah.
okay with the husbandry that those folks practice, and everybody, you know, is on board with that. So I would take one of my kids over there and we'd actually rank these people. And you know, some people just didn't make it because it's like, whoa.
What are some of the things that can you summarize what are some of the things that are important to you?
Like, as far as the way, you know, it's the biggest thing is their demeanor around the cattle themselves. You know, I mean, are those cattle comfortable with them, or are they? Is it a freak show because they had really bad shoot experiences, or you know, they got roped and dragged too many times or something, you know? So it's just, you know, those, I mean, it's just tough on cattle and tough on their disposition. You know, it's just really evident. And you know, we're not watching the people, we're watching the animals and see what they're really, you know, if they got horses and they use horses, man, you could tell it in 2 seconds. You know, are they trying to drive a horse like a motorcycle, or are they riding the horse as a partner? You know, are they connected with that animal? You know, and I mean, in a second, you can say, wow, that person should never be on a horse. So you know, it's really about watching the animals, not the people. I think I've learned much more from animals than people.
You know, people who work with animals will often say that, right? That goes back to the nurturing nature and nature being our teacher.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn if we just pause, watch,
exactly,
listen,
exactly, yeah,
watch some more.
Yeah, this whole thing of biomimicry, you know,
yeah,
man, you know, you can almost pull all of conventional agriculture apart and say, you know, people will say, where did we go wrong? And you can just say, well, how does this mimic a natural process? How does farming monocultures of corn and soybeans and canola in the Midwest mimic any natural process on Earth? And of course, we're going to just destroy everything. We're going to destroy all the connectivity because there's no mimic. There's not even a piece of a mimic in there.
So what would, sorry to cut you off. Did you want to finish?
No, it's okay.
Thought?
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was wondering what your biggest piece of advice for farmers would be then in that.
Well, that's actually what brought us to this soils thing. We started watching nature, you know, like things like this. We were calving in January, and it was ludicrous. Because I mean, Natalie, I live in a climate similar to yours. You're quite a ways north of me, but I mean, it would go into 30 or 40 below zero here for weeks at a time, and then we get these winds off the continental divide, and you know, have 65 degrees below zero wind chills, and we're trying to calve. We're trying to you're trying to get wet babies to come out of mama cows and land on the ground and not freeze within 10 seconds to the dirt. So they can't even get up because they're frozen to the ground, right? So I mean, is that making any sense? You know, so I mean, that to me is the coolest example, because that is that's the definition of insanity, isn't it? And I mean, definition of insanity is we keep doing it, right? And meanwhile, you know, we're looking up in the hills this time of year, and guess what? You know, in another month, the elk are going to start calving. You know. And we're watching them. They're just right up here on these mountains. They're calving out their little baby calves, and it's guess what? The grass is green. It's waving in the wind. The snow on the mountains has long retracted. It's up in the highest peaks now, and these elk are running around the foothills all around the ranch calving. And it's like, wait, the elk calve in May and June. Why shouldn't we do that? You know, so I mean, that's like one of the clearest examples. The other thing that we started thinking about with mama cows, is, this whole process of weaning was like so much stress on the animals. There was, you literally vaccinate cattle for weaning stress, and
Wow.
the mom is stressed too, because she's standing there worried about her baby. And
Yeah.
so she's losing weight because she's not going to go
Mhm.
graze. She's wondering what the baby's doing on the other side of that fence there, if you're fence line
Yeah.
weaning. And some people actually wean by just loading up the calves
Mm.
and taking them to another ranch or to a feed
Yeah.
lot or something like that, And so now you got mama just walking. She's covering miles, just looking for the baby that disappeared one day.
Yeah.
It's like, where did my baby go?
Yeah.
And she's not gaining weight, she's losing weight.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, baby is at said feed lot or maybe on the other side of your fence line deal, and maybe thinking about contracting pneumonia, and because it's creating stress. And as a result, whenever you have stress in any organism, you have predisposition to a disease infection. So anyway, one day I said to Carol, I said, you know what? We're not going to wean anymore. And she was like, that sounds like insanity. Because I mean, it's like, this is a big time what daddy does thing. And this is the way we always did it, kind of thing. Well,
yes.
People have weaned for centuries with cattle, right? And I was like, there's got to be a way, because there's nobody up there separating the elk cows and calves when they're yearlings. There's nobody going in bison herds in Yellowstone National Park or in wood buffalo provincial park or national park now up there in Canada saying, hey, it's time to wean, guys. We got to separate these yearlings off. Nobody's doing it with caribou, right? Somehow nature's come up with some kind of way to handle this. So I actually wrote a little post about it, and I got some immediate backlash about it from other ranchers. They're like, well, dude, you're an idiot, because you're going to compromise the colostrum that the baby should be getting, because that yearling's stealing it. And actually, it was a concern for me. I was like, I don't know the answer to that question. So Natalie, I still don't even know the answer to the question. But we didn't have any weak calves when we started doing it, and sometimes we'd see the yearling sucking the mom with that first milk as well. And I'm like, well, there goes the first milk, but somehow nature's got that all figured out. I don't know how. I don't know what the mechanism. I'd like to say, oh, I got some scientific research that shows that even when you're like, I don't have anything like that. I just had nature with all these other wild animals saying, hey, we don't wean anything up here. Maybe you should try. and I'm really happy, because I've watched it. We don't have a lot of mama cows anymore, but we used to have like 150 that I started doing this with, and they were all mixed up with the yearlings. They were all together in one herd. And I didn't see there was nothing that went wrong.
Powerful. I'm just thinking about it at my parents' farm. We never weaned our animals either. And it is a curious practice that people have. When did you start doing that?
Oh, that was probably, I think it was like 7 years ago. I haven't told any of my neighbors that. Because I mean, that would be almost like, apostasy.
That's right. Yeah. So I just want to be mindful of the time here, Glenn. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you really want to share or bring to life?
I think that natural mimic, and as a result, when you embrace those kind of principles, you're going to start building this biological capital, and then don't ignore that relationship with people, to connect them back to what you do, because it's the hope. It's really the hope in agriculture, regaining those two insights, that, rebuilding that natural mimic and rebuilding those relationships with people. They're the path back. They're the path back. A lot of people are like, man, there's no hope in agriculture. How are we going to feed all these people, 10 billion by 2025 and this and that and the other? And I'm like, no, all the answers are right there. We can just look at what nature did. You look at like the bison. You live in Saskatchewan. There's the numbers are out, but it's somewhere between 30 and 90 million head of bison ran up and down just the central part of our continent, just the central part of our continent. And sure, we had wood bison and we'd elk and we had a lot of deer. But if you just take the biological capital that bison produced in a wild setting on just, 10 states and 2 provinces, it's more protein than we produce in America today. I mean, we're killing 27 million head in our annual kill. This includes old dairy cows and feeder cattle and feedlot cattle, 27 million head. The bison by themselves in a fraction of the country, the fraction of the land that we use today to produce cattle, from sea to sea, coast to coast. We're using all that land to try to produce 27 million head. The bison just ran on like 8 states and 2 provinces and produced more biomass in terms of protein than we do today with our industrial juggernaut of agriculture, and that's an earth-shattering notion to me. I don't have to go through all kinds of numbers. Those numbers are so easy to come by. I just look at the simple math. I could tell a 5-year-old that, and they'd say, wow, nature did a really good job. Nature did a really good job. And to me, it's not unthinkable to rethink things in those terms, to bring living soils back to those beautiful Midwestern soils, a living soil sponge, a biota that's deep all the way down to 15 feet of carbon, tons of biological material. I hate to say it's a silver bullet, but it really is. It really is. And it's all about reconnecting relationships. So
what's the silver bullet?
The silver bullet is all about reconnecting relationships, our relationships to living soils, that living soil sponge, and reconnecting relationships to the partners, the eaters of the food. If we just would take seriously those things and get out of this crazy commodity monocultural juggernaut that we're in and re-embrace nature's species diversity, I think we'll find that we'll be able to feed the earth without a problem. I have tons of hope in it. We just got to get the word out. I mean, it's all of us, Natalie. We just all got to get the word out. And it's a word of hope. It's not like
it is. Yeah, it is. And you really believe that animals are part of that hope.
I don't know how you could not, because every living ecosystem on the planet has animals as key for nutrient cycling, right? We can't take them out. If you go prehistoric on any ecosystem, any living ecosystem, they all had animals, And the crazy thing about the planet Earth is everybody is eating their dead cohorts. If you look at soil, look at soil fauna and biology, they're all eating detritus, okay? Cattle are eating plants that are now dead, immediately dead as soon as they process them. It's a cycle of life and death, just continually in nature. And, if we miss that key point, we've missed a relationship.
Yeah, thanks for naming that so well, Glenn, because I want imagine if we change the story around relationship with the cycle of life and death and brought that presence not only to agriculture and the way we live and the way we eat, also into the world and what's happening right now with COVID and with the pandemic or the COVID area. Like, could you imagine if we reoriented to the cycle of life and death and brought relationship?
It'd be world changing. Absolutely. It's just a perspective, right? I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
But it's a healthy perspective. And for some reason we've lost track. I mean, what's crazy, Natalie, is this has happened in about 100, 150 years where we've totally lost track.
Yes.
Because
So how
think
do we
about it,
bring that back in? How do we presence that into the conversation?
I think it's just the grassroots. It's not like you're going to call up Justin and I'm going to call up Joe and say, Joe, we got to make a change. Justin, we got to make it. It isn't going to happen, right? The only way we can make this happen
Mhm.
is by talking to our neighbors and just loving and saying, you know what, you know, this is working. I had a neighbor come by the other day. Actually, it was a year ago now. We say the other day, it's all relative, right? But anyway, he knocks on the door and
Feels like the other day.
this guy has never been nice to me. He's been farming over on his place. He doesn't really ranch, he just farms, you know, so he's just growing crops out there.
Yeah.
And he comes over and knocks on my door, and I'm like, oh no, here we go. Because every time he's come over, he's like saying, hey, I think one of your employees trespassed on my property. You know, he's got, so I'm like, now what? Now what happened? Or one of my dogs went over there, you know, because sometimes my border collies get out and they find a herd of elk and they have a great time. So
That's right.
but anyway, because he's got like 300 elk that live resident on his place down in the river bottoms there, and they're beautiful, and he loves them, you know, but he farms all the upper ground and he leaves that bottom place as a wildlife refuge, which I think is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to connect with this guy, but he just, every time he has just bit my head off, you know. I mean, I try to shake hands over the fence, you know, because he's working on the fence down there a lot, hanging up no trespassing signs. I don't have any in my place. So he's pretty much got the signage covered for the entire valley. But anyway, he comes over, knocks on my door, and I invite him in. It's Scott, what's going on? And what's funny is my border collie, Clyde, totally knows that this guy is not legit. Okay. Clyde flies through the air, chomps down on a pant leg and bites pretty hard. But what Clyde doesn't realize, he's just a pup. You know, he's got his eyes closed while he's in the air. I don't know. I think that's a defense mechanism, you know?
Yeah.
He bites my leg. He got the wrong leg. He bit mine, which was really good, right? So I was like, "Go, Clyde, dude, man, you know, that's my leg." And he was like, "Whoa, boss's leg. I'm out of here." He disappeared. So anyway, I said,
Yeah.
So that was a little disturbing. So I said, "So what's up?" And he said, "Hey, I got something I was wondering about here." And I said, "What do you got?" And he said, "I got a soil test back. I was wondering if you could interpret it for me." And I said, I could try to do that. And we talked for a little bit. I asked him how the family was, and he asked how mine was. And it was the most amiable conversation I've ever had. And he puts his hand on the door and he looks back one more time to me. He says, you know, if you got time, I want to talk to you, like really talk. And I said, about what? He said, you know, I've been ranching, farming this place for 20 years, and I have yet to make a penny. It's been all bleeding red every year. No matter what the market is, I'm losing money. It seems like every time the market's good, my costs go up, my fuel goes up. He said, somehow I feel like you're making money. You have all these young people working around here. They seem to be happy. I want to know how I can make money. When you're ready to tell me, give me a call. So anyway, that was really cool. See, I think that is
really
the kind
cool.
of the grassroots thing. You know, we don't got to go knocking on doors, proselytizing and standing on stumps. But I think that we're still here, you know, that we're still here and we're happy and we're joyful because it's fun, you know, because it's fun when you see that.
That's right.
It's fun when that water goes in there. It's fun when you're making money, Natalie. I hate to sound mercenary about money, but it's fun to make money. Okay.
But it's fun to be able to support yourself doing something that you really believe in and that you really love, and to see something that is it's like the seed that sprouts, and it's like the grass that grows, and it's like the trees that lose their leaves. Like it's this cycle that feeds us and nurtures us, and that we give back to, and it gives back to us. So and I think that's a really important piece to presence with farming, and presence with gardening, and presence with ranching, because it is possible. It is possible to feed yourself, to feed your family, and to feed your neighbors, and to feed others. And support yourself.
Exactly. Now think about, the agriculture that we see in our world today instead, Natalie, especially in Canada and the US. I mean, have you seen these suicide numbers?
They're huge. They're really huge.
I mean,
And that's one of the reasons. Yeah.
I mean,
That's one of,
obviously they're not having fun. Okay.
no.
But they could be. I think they could be.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
the steps are not obvious, but there are steps
No.
that they can do
Yeah.
where in 10 years they're having fun.
Yeah.
And tell you
I
what,
agree. And maybe even sooner.
yeah. Well, it's fun to know that you're gonna have fun, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because you're heading in a direction. You're heading in a direction that's going to take you to a fun place.
Yeah.
And that's fun. That's like really engaging. Like I'm on this board of this thing called the Grassfed Exchange, which is an international kind of grassroots organization of grass-fed producers throughout the world. And we're talking about these folks up in Montana just 2 days ago. And we're thinking about having them as a speaker at this coming Grassfed Exchange meeting in Texas, which is actually a year from this June because of COVID. Trying to remember their names. I have not met them. I know a lot of people in Montana, but I have not met them. But anyway, they had a grain farm, about 8,000 acres of grain, commodity farm, chemicals, blah, 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 blah. I've been all over the High Line up there in Montana. It's that Highway 2 that's just south of the Canadian border, stays up there, goes all the way through Dakota and Montana. And when you drive the High Line and you look at those soils, Natalie, they're dirt. They're dirt.
It's true.
For 500 miles. It's 500 miles of dirt. There's not a living thing in that soil. It is basically Mars up there.
It is.
Where a lot of these guys farm. The tillage is just incredible. It just, they leave a lot of stuff fallow in the winter. It's tilled and just laying it open and exposed, and to me, bleeding in the wintertime, because you're bleeding everything. All your organic matter is just volatilizing. It ends up in Minnesota or in Manitoba because it gets blown eastward, with the westerly winds. And and he's up there, him and his wife. They went to a ranching for profit school, even though they were farmers. And anyway, it transformed their entire operation. They rewrote their entire operation. They're now incorporating cattle into what they do, and they're entirely happy. They're having fun because it's like, it just in a period of a few years, they have hope and they have joy. And when you have hope and joy, you're having fun, right?
So powerful.
And they were in a desperately hopeless situation. So it's possible. It's something everyone could do. But it's like, it's not the government that's going to say, hey, do this, and you'll have fun again. No, it's you and me. It's our neighbors. It's this grassroots relationship where people visit together over coffee and say, I want to have fun again. I love to farm.
Yes.
I love ranching, but I want to have fun again.
Yeah. It's having those conversations. Yeah. And igniting the possibility and the opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Glenn.
Oh, it's great, Natalie. It's great just hanging out and visiting.
Honored to. Yeah, really awesome. One of the things that came up actually just yesterday with my copy editor is, and this is one of the reasons I started Heart and Soil, is because I think the mental health of farmers does struggle grotesquely. And I think that is one of the first next steps that I want to do. Is I don't know what it looks like, if it's like a mental health summit for farmers. I'm not too sure, because it has to be really positioned in a way where people actually want to have fun and come and not feel shamed or not able to relate to it. So I'm feeling like there might be some kind of conversation that we can have to have you be a part of that, or maybe we just started
That'd be
conversation
wonderful.
around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
that'd be
things
so
like that.
powerful.
I think it's things like that that you're conceptualizing that are going to be the game changers, because if we
Yeah.
can roll out the red carpet, I mean,
Oh,
it's a red carpet, because you know what? These people are
yeah.
survivors.
They
They're
are. They're
survivors,
right.
So
And they're
if we
trying
can,
so hard.
exactly. So if we can just, roll out that red carpet and say, you are more than welcome. We'd actually be honored
Mhm,
to have you come
mhm,
and just
mhm.
participate in a discussion and just have a visit,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so because,
Yeah.
man, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people have this in their heart and soul, no pun intended
Mhm.
with your magazine. It's in them. It's in their genotype to try to make a living with the land and on the
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
And
It
they're
is.
just suicidally depressed, a lot of them, literally, because they've lost their way. Some, and they don't even know when, they don't even know how. Maybe it
Mhm.
started with granddad, maybe it started with the county agent, university agent. I don't know, but
Yeah.
either
I don't know.
way, they've lost their way and we've lost touch with those relationships. And boy, we just need to bring those back. And
Mhm.
it starts with us relating to each other.
It does. Yeah, it really does. Cool. Well, I'm excited about those next steps.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you. So, this issue is going to the designer this week, and it'll be out in about 3 weeks. So I'll
Cool.
touch base with you guys and see how we can collaborate to share it and
Hey, did you
find out
get,
what we can do to support you. Yeah, we got the pictures. I did send,
okay,
it's Linnea. Is that how you say her name?
Linnea. Yeah.
Linnea. So such a
She's
pretty
named
name.
after a little flower. You had it in BC. I don't think it's in
Okay.
Saskatchewan. No, it's in northern Saskatchewan. It's in the boreal
Okay.
forest. It's called Linnea borealis. It's a little
Okay.
tiny flower,
Yeah.
also called partridge berry. It has these little twin flowers. And
Mm.
Carol and I walked through some of that in Montana when the day Linnea was born. We thought, wow, what a beautiful day.
That's so cool. That's really cool. One of my sisters, who's also a farmer, named one of her daughters Azalea after the azalea
Wow,
flower.
cool.
And it was
That's cool.
also a similar kind of story. Yeah, so
Yeah,
powerful.
that's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. You reach out anytime.
Okay.
We can support you, or if you have something that you feel like we really need to share or amplify,
Sure. Okay.
let us know.
Well,
I'm
sounds
here to
good.
serve.
Natalie,
Okay.
it's been
Thank
great.
you.
And thanks a lot for your time. And it's been an honor to hang out with you. So thanks again.
Thank you. All right.
Okay,
Big
bye now.
love.
You
Okay.
bet.
Bye-bye.
See ya.